custodial, grounds, and every other thing that I'm missing.
Right.
Contractual obligations, meaning not, things like asbestos and,
Is that all just
Elevator,
out of the budgetary, or is
contract.
there?
That's all out of the budget.
Yeah, there's revolving
There's,
account.
there's a use of facilities fee account,
Mm-hmm.
which covers, for example, the custodial services that cover weekends and activities. There is some grounds work that is done out of the athletic revolving, though increasingly we've had to reduce that because the athletic revolving fund, as you know, is not sustainable. So we've had to absorb more of that in the budget. There is the parking fund. I would tell you that probably the bulk of what is expended from the parking fund really applies to maintenance and grounds. That's where you would stripe the parking lots. We conceivably access that. Well, actually, one of the significant things that we do as far as our winter maintenance, that's what pays for the Bobcat that you see rolling around moving snow. Comes out of that fund. So there certainly are other funds that contribute to that. There's a small amount that comes out of, or over the years has come out of donations, because there have been from time to time donations. For example, a couple of years ago, we got a donation of like $700, which was used to buy the roller that we have for the fields. Things like that, but for the most part, that's what the other funds are that would cover it.
okay. So if I look at these numbers and I see this year for our budget, so these are all lighter, all these numbers are lower than what we actually spend, based
Correct.
on what you just gave us. So if we think that we're gonna spend somewhere around $800,000 this year, probably 934 when we're all done.
Something like that, yeah. I mean, I will
I'm
tell you,
confused
I will
as
tell
to-
you the jury is still out a little bit on that. We just had an incident at the Pearly School with some flooding. That's going to be an issue that we hope most of it will be covered by insurance.
Yeah, but either way, though, right now, we've already spent $800,000.
Oh, yes,
Right,
absolutely.
so when I look at the amount in the maintenance override, what does that do? I'm confused as to what that's gonna do for us, because if we're gonna be at 934 this year, and historically we've been between 668 to 728,
Well, I think-
and we have a number of somewhere around 500 in the maintenance override, where does the 400 come from that we're missing?
The 400, well, again, part of that, the maintenance override would not fully fund, in my opinion.
Remember, we asked Mike
I
that
guess
question,
that's-
and
I-
Mike
I guess
said,
these
it's
numbers
not,
are
it's
now
not gonna fully cover the cost.
The maintenance override would not
It's in
fully
the
fund the
answer, too.
expenditures.
That's in the answer.
It makes it sound like it's a good start. That's never a
It's a
good
good
answer.
start,
Right.
that's right.
So right now, if we say that we're gonna spend 934 this year, and there's 500 on the maintenance override, I'm just saying round numbers, we're still gonna have to have 400,000 in our budget.
Probably at least, and again,
At
one of the
least,
weaknesses
right.
of the maintenance override that's, as it's been proposed, is it certainly makes significant, conceivably significant improvements in, for example, custodial staffing. But in doing that, it basically wipes out, again, if you look at the overall money you're spending, it basically wipes out any kind of contracted services. It doesn't really do anything for any of the deferred maintenance. It does a
Right.
little bit more for preventive maintenance, but I would argue that there are ways that we could affect preventive maintenance
Right,
more
okay.
using our own employees and using a more aggressive maintenance supply line. So no, I think that it's, again, as it's currently configured, and I need to say, I think everybody knows at the table here that I support the general concept, okay?
I
of a
think everyone at this
combined-
table supports the general
Exactly.
concept.
But the problem is I think what, unfortunately with the plans before us, we have a budget and we have sort of one alternative and we don't have a plan. We've never really thought out what's our mission, really what we talk about doing all the time. What is the mission we have for a combined program? Okay, what are gonna be the goals? How are we gonna achieve those goals? And then, once we do that, the devil is in the details. What is gonna be the hierarchical structure to manage that?
Right, we
Okay.
got some good answers
yeah.
of where they're going at the.
But
Well,
still incomplete,
Well,
I think.
They're
I mean,
answers.
Right, exactly, it's not a plan.
And again, I think it's avoided one very significant. It's focused on basically what is a simple solution in contracting it all out and quote unquote forgetting about it and letting somebody else handle it. And it really hasn't looked at the issues of dealing with our own employees
Right.
and our own organizational structure. I mean, I will tell you in the public the story the very first time I did this, and I have I have contracted out for these services twice in my history, and I have ended those contracts well before they should have been done for non-performance, twice. Okay? And the very first time I did it as a result of strategic planning that Franklin Pierce College did, and I was the chair of that strategic planning group, and we were in a difficult economic time. Sound familiar? So we were looking at ways to potentially save. One of the things we did is we reached out, did some bidding, and brought in a company to provide all of those services we're talking about as contracted service. Now, school is opening, kids are arriving. I know George can appreciate what that looks like with all the parents and all the kids and everybody. And I was in a building and I was covering for one of my staff members for lunch at a little coffee kiosk where people could come up and they could get a cup of coffee, they could get a water, they could get a little bakery item. And the trash was full. And a gentleman by the name of John Sullivan, a dear man who was my head custodian before I had contracted out for the entire college, was walking by, and I said, John, I said, can you give me a hand here? Can you empty this trash? And John literally started to cry. And he told me, Terry, I can't do that because this is not my building. And then he whispered to me, it was like he didn't want anybody to hear this. I'm not supposed to do this. I'll go find somebody in this building and get them to come up here and help you. And that was the beginning of where I quickly realized was not going to be a successful relationship.
One of my biggest concerns, I mean, we have a lot of loyal employees here
That move on a moment's notice to
yeah,
whatever
and they
building.
do whatever we ask
have
of
enough
them.
of
I
them.
can't.
Right.
We don't have enough. Quite frankly,
definitely don't have enough.
the initial proposal we saw just for custodians called for 13.6 custodians. I dare say that if I right now was employing 13.6 custodians, we would not be having this discussion.
Right.
And we would be maintaining the town buildings
Right.
as well as
Absolutely.
the school buildings.
We'd be right, do you have other questions?
No, my major concern was just understanding that it funds us for only a little more than half of what we're gonna expend this year.
Correct.
And, I mean, I think the idea is great, I think it's a great
Absolutely.
concept. I think financially, we all really need to sit down and go through these numbers so that the town understands what we're up against.
Right. I think it's also important to know that in talking with the chair of the FinCom, we were told that should both overrides pass, the schools would not necessarily get that $500,000.
Well, and the schools would never get, I'm sorry to cut you
No,
off,
that's
Madam
fine.
Chairman. The schools, when I did the analysis, the schools were never going to get $500,000 because there's a funding gap.
I understand that, and that's
But you're right.
that's the general perception that the schools would be getting then 1.7 is not what we have been told.
It was made very clear to us that
Right.
if the override that we've proposed for the schools passes, then that
Right.
portion that was earmarked for the schools would not be coming to us.
Agreed. So as members of the school committee, looking out for the children, it doesn't make sense at this time.
Economically,
The
there's
way
no-
it's presented and where they're at on this right now. Just to me, I don't know how as a committee, we could support something that's not supporting the best interest of our schools.
I think the challenge is the timing of it too. We've literally
Right.
been working with this plan. We had one meeting and we've only been working on it for, 2 weeks, maybe
But
3 weeks.
bear in mind, Carol's been kind of pushing this along for a couple
We've been
of
talking
years
about this
now.
for a couple of years. We agree, the value of coordinating services, centralizing purchasing, establishing more consistency in the way we do the work. We've been supporters of that and have been encouraging the committee to support it as well. But again, it's doing it at the 7th hour has been the challenge here, right? So we've got some questions, but just a simple question for me is so how does this work in terms of reporting? Who makes the decisions about
The pearly
the
flood, how do
schedule? Who does this contractor report to? And I'm not opposed to it to being the town manager per se, but we're the ones who are probably going to be using the majority of the services. So how something as simple as that? How do those decisions about priorities get made? We just haven't had a time to flesh it out. So conceptually, I think we've said we
Absolutely.
We were discussing.
That's a dilemma I
Town
think we
manager
find
sits here, and more than 2/3 of the issues will be in buildings that.
And he doesn't sit here and here on Fridays.
Right.
And I think the issue, I mean, today,
We
the
do have,
pearly
and we
flood.
do have some questions.
It's a
The
perfect
teachers have
example.
expressed some
The
concerns.
teachers have some significant
about,
concerns about
people that they
background
don't know
checks and
necessarily.
They're
and-
comfortable with the custodians we have now, they know them. Teachers working late.
I think Terry is the bottom.
I'm not that, I believe we should be looking at options. And
Of course,
and
that's what
I'm
we
with
think. We
Terry
agree.
on the fact of conceptually, I embrace any type of consolidation to
Yeah.
take duplication out of the system.
You do too.
I do want to start with a positive note before I go on the negative side. So the positive side is, as much as we get trashed as a committee for not funding maintenance and custodial services, I think it's pretty impressive that we've gone from $666,000 and let's see, this is 11, 10, 9, 8, right? So 666 is 8, 08, to 669, so minuscule increase in the 09 year. Then we went up by, I know Ann's gonna whip the calculator out soon, $60,000. So that's a 10%, almost a 10% increase in 2010. Then we had another $67,000 increase, which is what, about 8% in 2011, and we're actually projecting even substantially more for the 2011 year. So while we have not been able to do the deferred maintenance piece, we have been responsive to what we have right now, and I don't think
Yes.
we're doing an absolutely atrocious job. So, hats off for that part of it, that the situation is actually better than we even figured it was at this point. So that being said, I remember a couple of years ago we had someone come before the committee and ask for, I believe it was the Department of Public Works, and of course nothing was fleshed out, and we were asked to vote on it, and it was going to bring maintenance only, maintenance and grounds, over to this new Public Works Department, and that would include plowing and so forth. But internal custodial would remain with the schools. And again, the committee embraced the concept, but it wasn't fleshed out, and we ended up voting against it, and I believe it was passed over on town meeting floor. My problem with this, but back a little bit, we should be looking at ways of saving money.
Absolutely.
The reality is, if we can, and I know this is a sensitive issue, we talk about outsourcing versus having our own employees. If we can realize some substantial savings by outsourcing the whole thing ourselves, we should be entertaining that. Because the reality is, if the town jointly is able to save this money, and we're the bulk of this process, in addition to the bulk of the funding, then we ourselves should be able to generate similar types of savings if we looked at the same type of proposal. There's no reason why we can't be doing what they're doing, regardless of what happens with the article. The second part is, as I go through this, the troubling piece I have is, like Terry said, the beast is in the details. And the one thing I don't want to have happen, and I'm going to bring up the healthcare bill, is that, if I remember what Speaker Pelosi said, was that vote for it first, we'll figure it out later. And there is chaos no matter what side anybody is on healthcare. We would be doing the same exact thing. We'd be voting on something first. The town would then take an action. We would then be in a certain position, and we would not be in any position of negotiations, in my opinion. Because I'm not sure what strings are attached to this. Once this is approved, in effect, what happened was, did we lose any leverage in those negotiations when we are the ones who will be using the bulk of the services? So that's troubling. Because what I would look at is, if we were to do any type of MOU on this, I would be looking at joint appointment of the company, and it's always going to be a unanimous appointment. So the town and the schools have to agree. There has to be a school insider that actually has some override ability. I hate that word, but in the day-to-day activities. I don't like the fact of people roaming through our schools when we have children. I don't know what Corey checking looks like. My father had a maintenance company, so I know what these these things look like, Terry, right? So you don't know as far as what the risks are that are associated with them, and we would really lose the bulk of the control when we are the beneficiaries of this. So again, conceptually, I love it. There are way, way too many holes in this that really need to be fleshed out. And I think at this point, for us to support it would really be a bad idea.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, this does require a vote, so the chair will entertain, am I endorsing or approving?
We go for the approval.
Yep. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the proposed joint school town buildings maintenance override, which is article number, can you look that up? I actually brought it with me.
She's approving.
Well, your motion is made in the affirmative.
Right.
I think where George is going
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that if you favor.
And then you're gonna vote down. Got it,
Right.
I get it.
Okay.
I got it, understood.
All right.
I don't have the,
What are you looking for,
I
Ann?
was looking for that.
For the number.
warrant
Number.
article
Hang on,
number.
hang on.
Yeah.
Oops. Wait a minute.
It's in the front. it's in the-
729,000 is what I believe the number is.
something like this, yeah.
It is 729.
I
So
think
we
so.
should embrace this, Terry, going forward.
Absolutely. We should start working on it immediately,
should
looking
be-
at the, what the alternatives could be. Absolutely.
All right, it's $729,583.
We want to make
Well,
the
I thought you
motion
were
again?
looking for the town meeting.